IVM.
Hey, welcome to Shunya 1, episode 41. Today we're talking about global versus local design, how to improve your user experience and building brand identity. Some things which are actually not things which a lot of startup founders and entrepreneurs think about, but we're happy to have a very interesting person on here today who is going to help us walk through how all this happens and why it matters.
Yeah, he's got some really interesting things. I mean, like, if you haven't, you should definitely check out Himanshu's blog post on the design of the 2000 rupee and the value of function over just plain aesthetics. I think that was really interesting, especially considering how much slack that particular design took.
Yep.
Speaking of slack,
of which,
see, look at the thing. We've both got the segues in our head.
Exactly.
Those seconds the word slack came in, we were both all about.
Exactly.
Speaking of slack,
exactly, and it's been a fun week because last week episode about Shunya coins.
Shunya coins. Yeah, Shunya coins is a trending hashtag.
Yes. Was it?
Not really, but
Okay,
maybe.
but we hope.
Sort of, kind of.
We hope.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for all the feedback. And now this means when we do launch this, you better buy.
Yeah.
And but we got some fun feedback.
We got some. So Shreyas Korad wrote in on a Slack channel. Love this interaction. It was very well rounded. Since I've been learning gamification, human focused design since quite a while now, this episode made me paint a picture of what the future could look like. Gave me reassurance to continue learning gamification seriously, and thanks. Hey, that's great to hear, Shreyas. And we also got another comment from Suraj Srinivas. Great episode. I specifically love the insight into how crypto could be an asset utility rather than a currency. Personally, I think this makes for a much better use case for crypto. I would agree with that.
Yep.
Which I think comes through in the conversation, which I guess people are going to listen to now.
Yes, and continue to dig up more stuff about blockchain because, as you know, if some folks had blockchain today,
yes,
our banks would not be out of so much money.
My God, the stuff that's coming out. I just read a comment saying that the Nirav Modi firm had access through PNB Bank to the SWIFT interface.
Why not?
Which is
they could just send
insane.
money to themselves.
That's crazy, right? Blockchain solves this stuff. So
or
I guess
so we think.
So we hope.
All right, let's get on with the show. But before that, we have our first ad on Shunya 1.
Hey everybody, we'd like to welcome a new sponsor, Storytel. Storytel is an audiobook streaming services for mobile and tablets. If you haven't heard audiobooks before and you're a podcast listener, audiobooks are probably right up your alley. You can enjoy your favorite titles when you travel, exercise, or cook. There are great books over here, like the Percy Jackson series is available if you want like some new fantasy, or if you want to go for something old school or classic. You can get either Bram Stoker's Dracula, or you could get Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter series. Download Storytel today from the app or Play Store and enjoy a free 14-day trial. That's Storytel, Storytel, Storytel from the App Store or Play Store. Download today.
So today we have Himanshu Khanna, the CEO and founder of Sparklin, over user experience design and engineering company. Wow. Welcome to the show, Himanshu. What's up?
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Amit.
How's it going? How's your Bombay visit? I'm happy that you've come here, and apparently we also have smog now, so it should be seeming the same.
Yeah, we have smog and someone lost something.
I know. I know.
Leaving something in a cab?
Yeah.
That's a Delhi thing? No, actually, that's a Bombay thing too.
Yeah, but it didn't happen in India, did it?
No, it did not.
Yeah. Well, things happen, things change. I think
things regress.
Memories remain.
Going from 2 to 1.
Yes. That's how it works. But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this with us. And we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. But let's start with what your story is and how Sparkling came into being. Because I think you've done a bunch of other startups of your own, and this is also bootstrapped. You've launched something called Pixel Jobs. You've been faculty. You've been doing a lot of things in the startup scene, especially in Delhi, Startup Saturdays. Mm-hmm. So tell us about your story and maybe the Delhi ecosystem you've seen over the last so many years.
Okay, so if you really want to know the story started when I was, I think, in 4th standard or 5th standard. That's when we were first introduced in the school to computer systems.
Wow.
And the programming language called Logo. I don't know whether you
remember
worked
us.
with it or not.
Wow, I don't know logo.
You don't? I remember Logo. Logo was a further advanced version of Basic, right?
Yeah,
It went through-
yeah. So we were introduced to Logo, very cool stuff. You basically write LT 90 and so on, and the cursor will start creating something in front of you. It was that simple. And I noticed that my classmates were creating something called square, rectangles, and so on.
Okay.
And I wasn't fine with it. I wanted to do something different, and I was creating the sketchier versions of cars using that logo language, which is okay, right? Because I used to be good at painting and so on, so it didn't really matter at that point of time. Then eventually around 9th and 10th standard, I started just creating weird stuff on computer, showing it to people, and then one fine day this guy walks up to me and tells me that, dude, I'm starting a new company and I need a logo, and these 3 people have told me that you design good logos, so can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I gave him a couple of options and he vanished.
That seems pretty typical of a designer's.
Yeah. No, but then we met again. I remember I had just given my 12th board exams and I was just walking to a friend's house and I met him on the way. And this guy's like, hey, you created a very amazing logo, and all kinds of synonyms that he could use, and you know what, it's a big hit. So he took out this 500 rupee note, shoved it down my pocket, and like, keep it, dude. It's yours now.
This is like a Delhi gully story.
Can I ask what year this was?
It has to be 2002.
Okay.
Wow, this is like an intro to some movie. Wo 500 rupees or some.
No, somebody paid you cash, right, for your first thing. That's kind of amazing in and of itself.
No. So that wasn't good enough. Eventually, as soon as he shoved that, that 500 rupee note, he was like, "Can you make websites?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Who doesn't know how to make websites? Of course I can." I had no idea how to make websites. What are websites? How do they work? I had no idea. I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So he's like, "Okay, how much do you charge?" I'm like, "Why don't you tell me what to do, and then I can tell you how much it'll cost." He's like, "Okay, let's meet tomorrow." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I ran to an internet cafe to understand what a website, how they created. Next 7 hours, I was trying to read up, understand. I got introduced to the whole Flash era of websites, how things work. Fortunately enough, I was already working with Flash, creating random animations and so on, doing my own experiments. So it didn't come that difficult.
Right.
Eventually, I ended up making some $16,000 out of that website.
Nice.
Out of which I remember spending 15,700 on buying myself the first smartphone.
Wow, in 2002.
Yeah.
The Nokia,
Nokia 3600, I think.
The one that was kind of like triangularly shaped a little bit.
Not triangular. This one was a little rounded at the bottom.
Yeah,
if you remember,
yeah.
it had a circular.
It's silver and grayish.
Yeah, that one.
I used to have that phone too.
I spent so much money on that phone that I had to go and ask my mom if she can lend me some money to buy a SIM card.
Yeah, that 16,900 sounds familiar as well. I think we're talking about the same phone.
Wow. So that's pretty much how design came about, and then the whole struggle to get into a design college, and what are you going to do in design, and blah blah blah. Eventually, when the college was going on, you had to pay a college fee, and typical design colleges are a little too expensive to afford. So you have to constantly keep working on the side. At that age, you call it freelancing. Once you get out of college, you start calling it consulting, and
that's pretty much. But it stays the same throughout.
It stays the same. Fortunately, those consulting, gigs took me out of India, took me to places like Istanbul, Milan, and so on. I got to kind of, work and understand how they think of design and how is it so different from, how Indians have been looking at design for so long. In fact, so much so that I could hardly ever find, any kind of gig in India while I was here. And then I remember, the whole concept of Sparkland started when I met this gentleman called Vivek Wadhwa.
Oh, the VC?
Yeah, the VC.
Oh, nice.
So he was coming down to Delhi. I was in Delhi at that point of time, and I thought, I have a few ideas of my own to, create a product. So why don't I, bounce them off with someone who actually knows the whole thing? And, this guy's been practically living in Silicon Valley, so he might be able to give me some kind of feedback. So here's me meeting Vivek Wadhwa, kind of showing him Delhi in my old Wagoner, and taking a longer route to a conference where he's supposed to speak.
Wow, how did you manage to swing being the Uber driver for Vivek Wadhwa?
There was no Uber at that point of time. That's how.
Nice. And you just showed up at the airports with a placard of his name?
I tried stalking him on Twitter and, bombarding him with messages. Hey, sir, you're coming to Delhi, so, if you can spare 15 minutes to meet me, it'll be great and blah, blah, blah.
Awesome.
So
you hacked your way into doing that, which is awesome. So you had all the, founder traits from day one.
I wish that was true and it actually helped in creating a great company. But, the journey is on, so let's see. Awesome. Anyway, so here he was sitting next to me in the car, and I was, trying to explain my idea to him, and he wasn't too impressed. He said, no, sorry, boss, you're a little too late in life. This is not an idea that's going to work, especially, with things that have advanced so much. And this is 2009 I'm talking about. And I almost took it to heart, and I'm like, oh God, I had this one idea, one great idea, and this gentleman who's so experienced is telling me that this will not work. Nevertheless, let's move on. Fortunately, this meeting was fruitful enough for him to remember me and tweet about me.
Okay.
As soon as he went back. And that's how Pankaj Jain got in touch with me, and he invited me to this meetup called Startup Saturday in Delhi. And I was like, yeah, let's go there. Let's meet a few more people who have this bug in their head to create something out of thin air, and let's see how others respond to such things. And that's how I ended up attending my first Startup Saturday. And from the second one, I was one of the key volunteers, and I think in 6 months or so, Pankaj had to move to US, and I was the one leading Startup Saturday.
Nice.
And as I started meeting more and more startup founders there, I realized that perhaps there is a requirement for design in India, even though they're not really talking about it at the moment, but it could be a great differentiator. And one of the key reasons no one talks about design in India right now, or that being a differentiator, is because people are not exposed to it. People don't really get to read about it so often. People don't know what design can really do to their product or service. So how do you take it forward? One easy way, or rather the only possible way at that point of time, was to start your own firm. And start doing such stuff for people, and then see where it goes.
Nice. Okay. Wow. So that's how Sparkling started. But
that's
before
how Sparkling.
that, you, like you said, you actually were traveling abroad. You were doing all sorts of design work. Was that tech? Was that UI UX? Was that so? What did you see as a difference between what you were already doing and the sense of design other customers of yours, clients of yours had outside of India, and the lack of it, so to speak, which you saw?
Or the differences too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, how do people treat it differently in both areas?
So I remember this one example clearly, and I think that will illustrate the kind of difference we are talking about here. So I was in touch with this client in Istanbul, okay, and they were one of the biggest gaming companies in Istanbul, and I've been working with them for almost 7-8 months now. And this guy suddenly, this was 2 a.m. in the night, and I'm talking to him over MSN Messenger, if you remember those days.
Yeah.
And this guy tells me, dude, I think you should come to Istanbul. And I'm like, why? So he's like, see, the thing is, now we are trying to kind of, rebrand our company. We are trying to come up with new interfaces. And we want you to come here, look at how the company performs, how people behave, how users behave, and how are they playing our games, how are they, paying money for those games. And then, create these designs. We don't want you to, just sit there in Delhi and, keep sending those designs to us. They're fantastic, but we want you to understand how our, systems work.
Oh.
And I'm like, wow, someone wants to invest time, money, effort in getting me to, their own country, their own city, for what? To make some kind of difference, which we fail to see otherwise. And it was actually quite a bit of effort because Istanbul was not giving business visas very easily in those days.
Okay.
It's all online right now. It's pay and go. But at that point of time, I got rejected twice.
Oh, wow.
So the kind of effort he had to make to get me there to Istanbul.
Right.
And once I was there, I was able to see the kind of system they worked with. So in India, the whole gaming scene has more or less been at our homes. We'll play most of the games on computer and so on. I mean, I'm not talking about the days when we didn't have games at home. You remember we used to go to these parlors and play, right?
Yeah. Right.
It was pretty much a similar scene. Now those parlors in Istanbul have been replaced by something called internet cafes, and that's where the transaction used to happen. So any and every game that is being created for those internet cafes and not for the home audience. So that people are there and people can hear each other, almost fighting for those Street Fighter kind of games and those mythological characters and so on. And that's where the transaction happens. That's where you get to see that these people are actually involved in the game to a different level. And that's how whole of the company got branded. That's how the whole interface got designed for those games from there on.
Right.
And that's how things moved.
Nice.
As opposed to how in India was that, you'll get a brief and then you can pretty much create anything.
Right.
Right.
So they I would say not a lot of people here had that whole holistic sense of design, or rather they didn't. Did they not believe that it was needed? Do you think? Do you think that just that one 5-letter or 5-word brief, which typically accompanies a design brief, like a very small concept, is what most people think is enough, and then it's your job, the designer's job, to basically take over and change their life, right? I think do you see a lot of misconceptions around what design really is and how to really come up with something great?
If you recall our early conversation outside the studio, we were talking about how design has been a thing that you can see, and it has to look good, right? And that's been the longest misconception I can think of, right?
Cosmetic, right? That's generally people who look at it as like a cosmetic layer too.
Yeah, and Steve Jobs tried selling it to people that design is what you don't see, and yet it continues to be like that.
For majority, most people still just see it as what I can see, and
that's about it. And then recently there's been a second layer of misconception that's been floating around. It's so much in tune that when I talk about this misconception at different workshops and events and so on, people almost feel dejected. They almost feel like, what are you talking about? And that misconception is that design is about simplification. Design makes things easy and simple. Design doesn't always do that. Design sometimes makes things complicated knowingly.
Yeah.
Right? Snapchat is a great example. So Snapchat is not an easy app to be used.
Yeah. It's purposefully
it's
very
obscure,
hard
right?
to discover.
Yeah, I've put stuff on. I've installed it 3 times, but within hours, I'm just like, I can't deal with this shit.
You're not the TG.
I'm not the TG.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So design is not always trying to make things simple, right? But that's not what we understand. We always understand, okay, so I see this Coke can in front of me. It's red, and that's design.
And that's the logo.
And that's how you create logos. I recently did an exercise on what clients demand in terms of logos. So a lot of clients come to you and say that, why are we using fonts which are not there in my system or my daughter's system or my PA system? Why do we end up using some random fonts which no one knows? Why do you do that? And so I've done this exercise in this blog post where we have taken all your famous brands like Coca-Cola and Unilever and Discovery and so on, and tried to recreate them using your regular fonts like Times New Roman and Arial and so on. And I call them regular brands. So these are regular fonts creating brands.
Wow, right. Must have been devastating.
Yeah, that would not go well.
So these are the exercises we tend to do. Another thing that happens more often than not is in terms of color. So people tend to choose colors based on their personal likings, right? So a massive company will come to you and say, you know what, I need a logo. And let's try and create a blue logo. And the first question you end up asking as a designer is, why do you want a blue logo? And they don't really have an answer. Like, the guy wants to say because it's my favorite color, but they can't really say that, right?
That sounds like a poor reason.
Yeah. So,
but it's actually not a bad reason. I mean, like, if you think about it, if you're somebody who's starting a company of some nature and you want a logo of a particular color,
right,
because you feel like that's the color that, I mean, like, it's not a bad reason.
Absolutely. But one should be willing enough to say it.
Yeah.
So most of the time we have to kind of hard guess it, saying that, is that your favorite color? Yeah. So, and then we kind of, do this whole exercise with them where we try and see that particular business as a human personality, right? Which is different from who you are as a person, because the company is not you and you are not the company, right? Business might have different requirements altogether. You might be a very soft, mellow person, but the kind of business you're trying to create could actually be very loud, very pepped up, very active, right? So how can both the personalities look the same, have the same likings and so on? So what does the business really want? So that's the first set of criteria. Second set of criteria is to understand what happens in the current set of industry. What is the current trend looking like? Sometimes you want to go with the trend, and sometimes you want to be the guy who's unique, someone
away
odd,
from the trend.
right? Which is very true for Slack, right?
Yeah.
So before Slack, all the enterprise chat softwares that so-called existed were all, seeming like lookalikes.
Yeah.
Right?
Very formal.
Yeah, the only thing I remember was like the Windows chat thing, right? I mean, like, I can't even remember other...
You remember HipChat? Have you seen
HipChat?
I've
seen HipChat, yeah.
So, any other...
okay, is that not more or less contemporary with Slack? Or has it been around for longer?
It's actually been around for much longer.
Much longer? Okay.
Much longer.
All right, okay.
Slack, I think, is the youngest version, if we,
Okay.
And now I think everyone's catching up.
Now there's
that.
a bunch of new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Facebook has its own version, Microsoft has its own version.
And have you seen what Skype has done to itself?
Just
to compete with Slack.
They've also just gone crazy with
it's
colors.
just, it's not a...
So all those enterprise chat softwares used to be clones of each other. They would look the same, they would behave the same, because that's the industry trend, right? And it's a business corporate thing, so it has to have a lot of gray, a lot of blue, and those kind of trends have to be mapped around. And then comes Slack, which says, you know what, I am not going to be the same as you. I'm going to have lots of yellow, lots of reds. I'm going to talk to you in a very cool lingo. I'm going to say, boss, this doesn't work. I'm not going to say, sorry, the file is not available and blah, blah, blah. I would rather come and say, are you sure you're looking for this file? Let's personalize this to a different level. Let's make it a little casual, and those kind of things. And that's how you differentiate. That's how you stand out. And look at today how Slack is practically being used by anyone and everyone, and where the valuation is.
So that actually it brought up an interesting question, I think. Do you think of so is design only the visual elements or lack of visual elements, or is this text and the way you interact with the customer from a textual basis? Does that also form a part of
UX, right? That's UX, isn't it? Or am I also mistaken?
No, absolutely not. So a lot of people, when ask this question, saying, what is design? And a very simple answer to that is, everything is designed.
Okay.
Sometimes by default, and sometimes consciously.
Okay.
So, for example, when you're asking me this question...
Right, this is coming to me from the Slack messages, right?
Absolutely. So, when you're asking me this question, in your head, you're trying to figure out whether you want to say need, or you want to say necessity, or you want to say requirement,
right?
And you're filtering all of that in your head before you say it. Okay, keeping me in mind, because you want to be sure that Himanshu sitting in front of me should be able to make sense of what I'm thinking in my head.
Right.
That's design.
Okay. All right. So basically, copywriting is a part of design.
Absolutely.
That's my question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. It's the experience you deliver.
Yeah.
Whatever your format, whatever your medium, whatever your product is.
See, it's actually very simple. Whatever we think in our head, right? We think in the language that comes naturally to us.
Right.
But whenever we have to say it to another person, irrespective of that being your wife, your girlfriend, or a stranger, you have to think it in their perspective.
Right.
You have to empathize. Okay, you have to understand, okay, will Amit understand this particular word this way? Or will Sheila respond to this particular word that way?
And we do it subconsciously,
Yeah,
of course,
right.
right? That's the adaptation that we do.
Yeah, and that's design. That's user experience design. You have to empathize with the user. Okay, if I'm designing something for a set of blind people, I cannot just assume that blind people will not be able to do this because I don't understand how they behave, right? I know so many people who are trying to suddenly create products for the for the grey collar market.
Okay.
And they assume that they cannot have a smartphone. I mean, why work with such assumptions?
So, yeah.
Right? Why don't you just go out there and check whether they have smartphones or not? It's not that difficult, right? That's what user research is. Right? Why don't I go out there and see how many people are driving cars today and how many people are taking cabs? Right? Will that help me? How many minutes or how many hours in a month is this particular user spending at an airport? Because when he's at an airport, he's getting used to a certain kind of visual language, which I can use in my software. Right? All of this is design.
Right.
And in nothing of this, I'm talking about how things look.
Yeah. Wow. That's no, when you think about it, this is what it is, and this is how you actually do better UX, and wow, I mean that was going great into what and the explanation was awesome, right? The how you empathize with your users if you're a product company or your audience or whatever you do is the application of what design really is. Wow, amazing. On that note, I'm going to take a quick break and come back and talk some more.
Hey friend, so if you're listening to a podcast right now, you're probably some kind of a nerd at heart at least. So maybe, just maybe, you might like another podcast about nerds, by nerds, and for nerds.
It's called Geek Fruit, a community to unite estranged geeks from across India and later on the world. We talk about television, movies, science fiction, adventure, fantasy, etc. Anything nerdy, it's all here on Geek Fruit.
You can catch a fresh episode every Monday, and you can check us out on any of your favorite podcast apps, like my favorite podcast app, the IVM podcast app. Give me my money, IVM.
Good plug.
Happy listening, you nerds.
All right, welcome back. And I mean, thanks so much for that insight into, how design actually works. And I mean,
Schooled me.
no wonder we all get it so wrong most of the time because we don't think like this. We don't naturally think of our products like this or the rest of the world like this, right? And I guess that's why we need folks like you and your team to, translate all of this for us. But in fact, let me ask you, where did the name Sparklin come from, and what's your thesis behind that? Like, was there an approach to even that?
So it's actually a little funny. So in most of the design schools, in the first year, the first module is mostly about branding. And the easiest exercise to give is that, go pretend that you have a company and try and create collaterals around it.
Oh.
Okay. And that's what we were given as well. And all of us were thinking what we'll call our company. And most of the designers tend to name their companies as their own name.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Himanshu Khanna Designs and so on. And I'm thinking...
Not just design, everyone, I think, most of...
It's pretty common, this, right?
So lawyers do that, chartered
Traders-
accountants do that.
a lot of traders do that.
A lot of traders do that. And I'm thinking in my head that, do I want to call my company as Himanshu Khanna? No, man. The company has to be a lot more than who I am. So no, it can't be my name. So what should it be? So it should be some kind of feeling, which is a little active, a little shinier and so on. So, okay. So I have the word called Sparklin. But then I'm thinking I don't like the phonetics of ling in the end. So let's cut it and make it Sparklin.
Nice.
Okay. So, I mean, first year college, that's how you think, and that's how the name came about. Sparklin. And it stuck. But me being me, I wanted to make sure that if I ever do have a company, I have a domain for it.
Okay.
So, and I was already kind of freelancing, and I knew the trade how to do it. So I went online, checked for sparkland.com, and wow, someone actually owns it.
Oh.
Yeah. So the next thing to do is to check whether they are actually using that domain or it's just parked. So people park domains, that someday someone will come asking for it and we'll get a huge price for it. So fortunately, it's just parked. No one's using it. So I contact the owner and the owner says that, yeah, you can have it. It's only for $7,000. And I'm like, wow, I'm in first year and someone's asking for $7,000 for a domain name. So I start negotiating, and it was very clear in my head that if this guy doesn't really, cut the price, I'm just going to change the company name. How does it matter?
Yeah.
And that's how I started negotiating, and eventually got the domain for $70.
What?
Nice.
Amazing.
Nice.
I don't know if that's just your amazing bargaining skills or what was that.
That's not normal, man. I've tried to acquire domains, and that's not normal. I mean, it's generally you'll go through 1 or 2 rounds of negotiation, and then after that, it is what it is. I mean, so that is great that you're able to get them down. That's that's 1% of the asking price.
Yeah, but when you're ready to walk away
sir.
and change your company name, it doesn't really matter, right?
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, but now
dude, seriously, we got to get you to negotiate on our behalf on some things, man. Let's send him to advertiser meetings.
In fact, bringing me to the question which I wanted to ask you also, right? Mm-hmm. You're a bootstrap company.
Right.
You started it obviously as an extension of your consulting practice,
right.
And evolved it into firm. The story is around doing UX and all of these the newer concepts, which I guess most people, like you mentioned, in India probably didn't even know at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But over the last so many years, I think as more startups and more apps and generally more touch points with customers have increased of digital products, I think UX has become a very colloquial term which people now understand or at least respond to. So how has that journey been, and because otherwise design firms, the larger big name design firms in the world which are, I don't know, like IDEO and all those folks are so expensive that only very large companies can work with them, right?
Sure.
I think and only when you reach a level do you even think of actually talking to a design firm. So how has the experience been for you? How did you grow and sustain this company working with the kind of customers India has? And can you give us some examples of how it's been?
So it's been like anyone and everyone would say that it's been a great learning, but it's really been a great learning, and on 2 aspects mainly. One, of course, is how do you sell design, right? And how do you sell design to a set of audience who don't want to be sold design, who don't even understand design, who don't even care about design.
And the last thing they want to do is pay for it.
Pay for design,
yeah. So they don't even want to be sold free design. So pay for it, yeah, of course. That's the bigger challenge. And the second aspect is how do you create a company? How do you sustain a company? How do you create a team where people work with you? How do you define processes? So
exactly.
Every year is a new learning that way. In terms of design and selling design, we were fortunate enough that at the time when we started, starting testing waters, a lot of VCs were trying to invest in Indian startups. And since VCs were coming with this whole background of Silicon Valley, there was this buzzword around design.
Right.
Whether people knew what design is or not, they wanted some kind of design input coming at a certain stage. Not really the stage where they started, but once they've raised a couple of rounds, they wanted some kind of great design input to come because
they knew it was lacking. At least that was sort of
that was sort of there.
Yeah.
And we started getting a lot of inquiries that way, and we landed one of our biggest clients. I'm not going to name who. Around that point of time. When you look at things from outside, it looks all hunky-dory. But once you're part of the internal team and you're consulting them on what has to happen and how things work and so on, you suddenly realize that no matter how big the team is or how big the company looks from outside, sometimes it's just too hollow internally. They were
Especially ones which grew so fast just on the back of money, right? I mean,
right,
that's
right,
also
right.
happens.
Yeah. People don't want to change. People don't want to recognize that there's something called design. People don't want to, make those alterations in the systems, have design processes. So when we started working with the team, we realized there's nothing called a brand guideline. Even though the company was big enough and the company had its own design team per se, there was nothing defined in terms of digital space, how the graphics will perform on a digital space versus a printed space or BTL and so on. Moving ahead in terms of UX, there was no standardization in terms of how different sections of the app will behave in a consistent manner. And those were just the starting points. From there on, things just grew and grew massively, right?
Wow.
So it took us time to even accept that, okay, such companies can have such bigger issues, right? There were tech issues involved. So one of the incident I remember that, someone shouted on their social media page that, boss, I lost so much money on your app. And the only thing they could do as a team was to send that money to that guy, because there was no way to track money at that point of time. It was never built.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So every day was these kind of challenges. But at the same time, every day is a great amount of learning, because then you're learning to deal with teams. You're learning to deal with egos of people. You're learning to deal with how someone has defined that this is how the button is supposed to look, and you're trying to explain to them that this kind of button will only turn people away because this is what they expect out of it, and I have data to prove it.
That's interesting. That's actually kind of it's something that I sort of experienced. I mean, like, I used to do part of what my older company used to do was web design and that kind of stuff, right? And one of the things that the guys who used to work on the design aspects used to tell me is that one of the most frustrating parts of doing this kind of work is that everybody knows your job.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that you face that even more when you're dealing with companies which have their inbuilt design departments, right? Nobody is willing to kind of defer to your expertise. They all think they know what you're supposed to do.
So not just with design teams, anyone and everyone thinks they really know your job.
Yeah.
Whether it's the CTO, CEO, CXO, doesn't matter at that point of time.
It should be blue. I like blue.
And most of the times they have a great reasoning in their head why it should be so and so. And those reasonings sometimes are, just way too far from what they're actually trying to create. Like, so we are working with this company which is trying to create something for an Indian tier 3 city audience. And they're coming up to us and saying that I think this is how this section should be because Apple does it like this. And I'm like, why are we even comparing?
Yeah.
Apple is not created for such audience. But I like Apple. and you can't argue with that, right?
No.
You don't know how to explain that, and this is their design head telling you. So we learned how to sail things through, how to get things driven, how to eventually launch a better version, how to create versions in terms of ideations. Because when the senior management is sitting across the table, they would want to create an endless list of things, right? And they would also want the work to get done. Right. And this is where you start explaining to them that, boss, we need to create this set of things in this version, and anything that comes beyond this will only be included in the next version. We cannot work that and be able to ship the product. Right.
Controlling expectations, of course.
Yeah. And then, of course, you'll have issues at your end in terms of team, because people will leave, people will come, you need to train them. You'll train them for a few months and then they will eventually leave. Trust me, creative people are the biggest
Flakes. Say it, flakes. Flakes. Flaky.
Yeah, okay, whatever he's saying.
Are the most in-demand people, is that what you're saying? They all become design heads of large VC-funded companies?
I wish.
Have people working with you suddenly become multiple valued on the market after working with Sparkling?
I said I wish. but so it's very difficult for any creative person to be at one place for too long.
Yeah,
of course.
And that's part of who they are. They can't sit at one place.
No, but that's also why, as much as I'm joking about it, that's also kind of why you want them, because that their brain works in a different way.
Different way, yeah. At the same time, I don't know how it happens, but eventually what starts happening is that once we reach a critical point in our career, we start thinking the same way all the time.
Right.
We don't want to see another perspective, which is very important for a design solution to come about, right? Perhaps that's the reason why trends come into being, because there are 4 people thinking the same way and they start calling it trend. And then the whole world wants to do it the same way. Google somewhere wanted to help everyone, especially the people who are just starting. So they wanted to kind of create an internal framework in terms of UI, and they called it material design. Right? And suddenly, like overnight, there are requests coming into us and inquiries coming into us saying that we want material design UX. Why can't you just do that for us? And we'll be like, why do you want us then? Right? If you want so-called material design UX, then might as well implement it yourself, right? Why do you want to come to us? And they're like, okay, so Google is doing it. Google is the standard. Why do you want to do it differently? And that's the kind of debates we have to kind of get into and explain that, boss, what Google does is not the benchmark. Google is doing it differently for different things, and Google will change it tomorrow if it doesn't work for them. Yeah. They're that kind of fluid company. But by that time, you would have already implemented that whole design framework in your company, which makes it doesn't make sense. We don't know, right? Yeah. And that's how things have moved forward.
You still see the Flash websites, right?
Right.
So
you still see Macromedia Flash requests to get downloaded.
Yeah. So people don't change. Once something gets into your systems, especially if you're a tech company or a product company or something like that, then you're more more likely to change stuff,
absolutely,
move stuff. But if you're an online company, then done is done.
Yeah.
Now come to me after 10 years.
Right.
So how's it been, sir, when you say obviously the concept of design has still been something which people are struggling with, right? As and maybe even the large companies, like you said, even a very large company has issues with understanding what's the best for them, and obviously smaller startups also. What's your outlook on where this is all going? And do you see it improving? Obviously, there are. I'm sure there are many other folks like you also, out there doing this and helping consult and improve overall aesthetic sense of, the approach towards design. And what's next for you? Like, where do you want to position yourself, and where do you hope that this whole market goes, our entire Indian product market?
So improvement-wise, yes, there's been a big change. The elements of that big change, one, the exposure level has increased manifolds. We are suddenly using Indian products and international products all on the same phone. So we are constantly subconsciously comparing that. So that's been a big win. Second, of course, a lot of people have started kind of getting exposed to the concept of design beyond how it looks, thanks to podcasts, thanks to videos, thanks to the books that have come in, thanks to the changes that have come in terms of blog posts written all across, where a certain company sitting in Germany is talking about how one quick design change gave them a big ROI.
Yeah.
Right. How people have started comparing different kinds of e-commerce websites that exist in India in terms of design, experience. So those kind of things have massively improved.
People's sense of response towards.
So we are actually slowly getting sensitized to what design needs to be. The meetings have changed. The kind of brief we get, that has changed. The kind of demands have changed. Now people don't call up and say that, we want to create a logo. now we get requests to create brand identities.
The word has changed.
The word has changed. Now they want us to create the whole set of guidelines. Right. Now they want us to define what kind of color code works where and why.
Nice.
People are finally asking the why.
Yeah.
People are not just saying that do it. People have started question why are you doing it in terms of design, which is a great change. Right. I mean, design has always been about the why, not what the eventual result is, but it's the whole process through which that result is achieved.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah.
Right. So I remember that there was this debate for an international product that we were working on, and it was mainly Asia Pacific focused, and it was about color, right? And the only way we were able to convince the client on the color was to tell them the history of that particular color in Japan.
Okay.
Which basically is that a few decades earlier there was no concept of green in Japan as a color, because they were never really taught that the difference between a green and blue.
I see.
Okay.
Oh, I think I heard about this.
Wow.
Or I've read about this before. Please, yeah, I have some memory of something like
so
this.
So it's very simple.
I think they didn't have the word for green either.
Yeah. So
till a long time.
There was no word for it, right?
Yeah.
And we recognize colors because we know the word for it.
Correct.
Right? We know this is red because someone taught us this is red. Right? It's very difficult for men to differentiate between different lipstick colors, because no one ever taught this to us. But women tend to learn this as they're picking up in terms of their makeup expertise, right? And that's why they know there's something called lilac, and there's something called fuchsia pink, and all those kind of things. To us, it'll probably be a shade of red or maroon. So a lot of men don't even know what is maroon and what is not, right? So great.
Okay. Hey, so I'm sorry, I gotta go back to this Japan thing a little bit. So what if green did not have a word for it?
They just called it
blue. Yeah. So they had blue trees. They had blue vegetables.
So the trees were blue and okay, all right.
And that's where the concept came from.
The sky is light blue.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wow. That's kind of crazy, because I guess that I am culturally steeped with the word green, so I know the word green, so everything green looks green to me.
Right.
But I find that really fascinating, right? I mean, because blue and green seem so different.
Yeah, but again, if we don't understand that difference, someone has not created that difference to us. It's very difficult to kind of observe and separate them in the color grid, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, it is. Wow.
Now that I think about it, think of people who live in frigid countries. They probably don't see most colors anyway around them.
Yeah, no,
as
exactly.
a civilization.
Exactly. No, so
it's not just that.
So they all know is black and white.
Yeah. No, but that's why green in Japan is so surprising, because Japan's a pretty green country.
Blue
country. Yeah.
So there's another level of science involved to all this is so sometimes when we are creating something for the masses, we also have to check it against the whole concept of color blindness.
Yes.
Right. A lot of people who are colorblind are anyway not able to differentiate between the red and green of the traffic signals.
Yes.
The only way they are able to understand whether it's the go or stop is because of the way it's placed.
The positioning, yes.
Yeah, the positioning.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah. So that's another check we have to do at times in terms of user experience. And when we explain this to a client, they suddenly get sensitized. Wow, so much goes into design.
Yeah.
And then, the whole acceptability kind of starts increasing. Right. And that's what has happened to India. People have, brought in some products and some frameworks from out of India, and they've started exploring that. They've started checking what are the possibilities. Like I remember this great moment when a client came to our office and he opened an app and said, you know what, I want our app to have this feature. Mm-hmm. And that feature was not really a feature, which was it was just one small UX change. Okay, but I was so happy that the client was able to notice that change and pinpoint it exactly for what it's required. So what happens in the app, if you have a lot of options, right?
Many options.
You're not able to guess that there will be more options if we scroll. if we swipe, right? So one hack to that, UX hack to that, is to show the other thing, the next thing halfway.
Right.
Right? Then you feel like, okay, something's cut, there'll be something there. So you try. And that's when you learn that, oh, this is swipeable.
Right.
And that moment when the client came and told us that, why don't we have this in the app, was like, wow, things are changing. Things are
The
getting
awareness,
better.
yeah.
The awareness there now. And the things have been just growing from there on. Now you have product managers who are reading every other blog that's possible on design and coming back to you with questions that why have we stopped using gray altogether. And when you give them those answers, it feels very, very, very satisfied. It feels great to finally be giving these answers to someone.
Nice. So that there is hope yet.
Yes.
And looks like more and more products going into the future will be built better, and we'll have more better UX all around us. I mean, it will not improve things overnight, like accessibility on the streets and all of that, which I think we still lack. I mean, there's so much bad UX in the life around us.
But at least hopefully the digital UX gets better.
Yeah, we always maybe were never sensitized to it, right? It's because everything around us is so badly broken.
So that's actually a great point of reference, which I tend to make in some of my psychological workshops.
Yeah.
So I give a talk on something called the psychology of design. And one of the reference points I try and do is, so I show the Starry Night painting.
Oh.
Okay. And I ask people, why do you think you would want to own this painting if ever given a chance? Okay. And they come up with various kinds of answers.
$50 million?
Yeah. So this could be an answer. And then I tell them that now imagine that you own this painting. Okay. But only you know that this painting is not real. It's not the original one. No one can ever find out. Will you still be able to live with it? And most of the people almost start shaking their heads saying, no, I don't think that's right. I mean, we have paid so much, it has to be an original and so on. And that then comes the question, why does the painting being original matter? You've already paid for it. The world thinks it's original. So why does it matter? How do you know something is original? How does something get that value? And that's when people start thinking, and they derive at a point that it's eventually about the whole story. How that painting was created, right? How was the whole society's perspective at that point of time? What were the cultural changes that were getting in, right? What was the painter thinking at that point of time? What were the implications? Was there a war going on? And that painting eventually is a reference point to that whole story that has been created.
Yeah.
And that's branding.
Yeah. Ah. Awesome.
That is, yeah.
Well,
that's tight.
that's nice.
That's how you end up creating brand identities. You create stories around them, right? You create reference points. You attach them to emotions, to cultures.
Amazing.
And people start, responding to that and not the product in itself, right?
We're here to tell stories on our podcast.
Yeah,
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I have always drawn a parallel between being a storyteller and being a great designer, because that's what storytellers do, right? They observe people. They observe what makes them tick, what makes them cry, what makes them laugh, right? What will make them comfortable or what will make them, suddenly cringe. And that's what designers do as well. They observe and create products to do the same thing. What will make you feel complicated in the app, or what will make you feel at ease in the app?
What will make old people be frustrated and not join Snapchat?
That is, well, they've got that thing down for sure.
So that all the kids can have their fun. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is an amazing way to, sort of explain this sort of the reality behind what design really is. Thanks so much for that. I think I stand educated already.
No, this has been really kind of informative. I mean, and also, we talked to a lot of people, but I don't think we've talked to many people about this degree, this depth of design and
of course,
what's going on in that space. And I think will be really interesting for people.
Great, man. Thanks so much for doing this, Himanshu. I mean, definitely, where can people reach out to you and talk to you? The famous Twitter handle that you have, which Vivek Wadhwa tweeted out.
It's very simple. It's the company's name with a guy, Sparkling Guy.
Awesome.
Oh, okay. That's easy enough.
Yeah.
Yes, and so do talk to Sparkling Guy on Twitter and reach out for all your design queries and needs. I think you guys are doing something awesome, and here's to more and more products which I'm sure there are many which still need your help. So let's hope you get to reach all of
Thank you
them.
so much for inviting me here and allowing me to share these kind of stories.
No, it was great, man. This has been really, really interesting, man.
Yep.
And just as a reminder, everybody, please sign up to the Slack channel. You go to the website, ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1. Over there's a button which says subscribe to Slack, and press that button, give your email, and subscribe to Slack.
If it's not the best UX, tell us, and we will fix it.
Yes. Well, okay. Not really. Yeah, okay. We'll try.
We'll try.
We shall attempt. And also, please, guys, remember, iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn or wherever you're listening to this thing, just please give us a review or a rating or whatever. That stuff really helps in terms of making sure that people find the show.
Awesome. All right. Talk to you next week, everyone.
He bends down to test the warm water for his bath. He comes here to quench his thirst for a hot shower and some podcasts. You can witness how he enjoys having other people talk about cool stuff in his bathroom. Indeed, it helps him with his loneliness. You can find more of his pieces on ivmpodcast.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.